Hi everybody, this is Damien from Legend Life. As you know, we're all about sharing inspirational stories about people who are living their best life. With our experience talks, we also look to speak to adventurers, travelers, outdoor experts to get their insights, ideas, and advice so you can experience more. Today, I've got the privilege of speaking to Rue McKenrick. Rue is a long distance backpacker and through hiker who's accomplished the Triple Crown. He's also done the John Muir and currently is circumnavigating the US. He's trying to create a new through hike called the American Perimeter Trail, which will cover something like 12,000 miles. So how are you today, Rue?
It's great to see you, Damien. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
let's get kick started, and then maybe you can give us a little bit of a background about yourself. How did you get into hiking and through hiking?
Yeah, so I really, a lot of times people ask for some sort of origin story, like what happened to you when you were a child
Yeah.
that caused you to end up being a professional backpacker. And I honestly can't put the whole mixture together. Like if you wanted to create a professional long distance backpacker, what kind of experiences would they need to have growing up to push them in that direction? And so, I mean, I have stories from when I was young, but I also have like many of my peers and family members who are not hikers or backpackers, and they grew up in the same area and similar experiences. But what I did want to highlight here is that I had access. So when I was growing up, I lived off of the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania in the United States, and um, we live very close to the trail, and my parents permitted me to go there, and um, I could spend time out there on weekends out there. I was pretty independent as a teenager, was allowed that. So really, uh, I think one of the big things is that I had access, so I got to have those experiences growing up. But also, I met a lot of through hikers during the time growing up, and especially as a teenager. And the through hiker is like the person who's attempting to go from one end of the trail the whole distance to the other end of the trail. So I met a bunch of Appalachian Trail through hikers, and I would give them rides and do some trail magic, which is like leave some snacks for them or help them out with whatever I could. And I think that was the real moment. I was probably like 16 or so, where I thought I'll probably end up through hiking the Appalachian Trail someday, and then do a bunch of other stuff. But that one I kind of knew was going to probably pop up someday, but I didn't plan for it. And it was a couple months before I left to go on the trail, and I felt compelled. I was a young man. It was 20 years ago, and I just quit my job and knew I was in the right place. I never regretted it.
Yeah.
I never regretted being out there. Um, I had a lot of questions before I started of like, what am I doing? But when I was out there, it was very intuitive, and um, I felt right at home, and just wanted more of those kinds of experiences.
Awesome. So what do you think has drawn you to through hiking? Because it's quite long distances. A lot of people do other forms like short 1 or 2 day hikes or section hikes, but you're doing the whole big months on end.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different hikers and backpackers, and um, so the reason that someone would do a long distance hike is an individual journey. Someone may be just doing it for travel. That's just a mode of travel they prefer. That happens with me a lot. Sometimes people want to challenge themselves or see if they can do a trail quickly, or if they can just complete it, or they can get part of it done. Um, commu- com- Community, meeting other backpackers and communing with nature. So there's many different motivations there, and mine has evolved a lot over the years. And so though people are interested in the professional long distance backpacking piece, I'm also a hiker. I'm also a day hiker. I'm also a picnicker. I also like to ski. I like to bike. And I like to section hike or go out for an overnight or go out for the weekend or go out for a week. Like it doesn't have to be long distance for me. And I state that because there are many people who are very attracted to the through hiking, which is hiking a long trail. And that would be, you know, anywhere from a couple 100 miles to maybe 2,000 miles. And they like the culture of that. They like the community of the people that are attempting it with them, and the beauty of it and the experience. But some of those people will never hike or backpack again. Like they just really like the through hike singularity experience. It's almost like if you trained up for a marathon, you know, and you didn't want to be a marathon runner, but you wanted to run a marathon as part of your life experience, you know, and you kind of did it, and then you know it wasn't quite
Yeah.
your thing after that, but it was helpful for your evolution during that point in time. And so um, with the APT, it's not singular in any way because I did it, you know, I've been working on this because it's my life's work. um, it's also my recreation. You know, it's like my lover. I mean, we're the APT and I have been in bed now for about 2 years, and we just can't get enough of each other.
Yeah.
And I like, you know, that's a great way to be as I'm getting older. For the first time this past year, I sensed it. I felt, uh, wow, my body's changing. Like it's finally starting to happen. And so to be coming up to this new and interesting chapter in my life and to be in love at the same time, even though it's not with a person, but
Yeah.
um, nonetheless, it fulfills me in that way. But I did not have a through hiking experience on this trip. And what I mean by that is I wasn't on a typical through hike experience. You will go into trail communities or communities that know the trail is there. They're very hospitable to hikers. They typically have services and they're welcoming. I was going into areas that were non-trail communities sometimes, and they would know who I was, and sometimes it would cause fear. And so there was a bit of a different reception. And then also, like, if I went to go through hike, let's say for instance the Appalachian Trail now, my people a lot of times think they want to go out there to be alone and
Yeah.
like to find themselves. But the truth of the matter is, like, if I went on the Appalachian Trail, I'd actually be more social and see more people on trail than I do in my normal front country life. So that's one of the things that like surprises people when they get out there for a through hike and realize there's like so many other people. I didn't have that experience. I was alone for, you know, the pretty much the whole trip.
Yeah.
So I wasn't hiking or camping with anyone, but it was a backpacking trip. So I did camp. Um, you know, I didn't have support going with me. I did camp. But uh, just many different experiences you can have with hiking and backpacking. And I say that because the APT, like the people that we want to enjoy the American Perimeter Trail, don't have a type. And I don't want them to look to me and think that I am the type. I'm not creating this trail for long distance backpackers. Will this be like the most exceptional long distance backpacking trail in the world? I think it will be, but um, but it's not for them solely. If someone wants to go long distance backpack this, have at it. But there's millions of people that won't be long distance backpacking that will be a part of this, and some of them won't hike. You know, some of them won't be hikers. Some of them won't be able to hike anymore, but they've participated with trails and trail organizations their whole life, and so we don't necessarily have a type. So I'm not a type, you know. We type me because people have an interest in some of the work that I do, but I enjoyed the outdoors just like everyone else. It doesn't have to be a 10,000 mile long backpacking trip.
No, definitely not.
It can be a 10 minute walk to a bank of a river to enjoy a sandwich, you know.
Yeah.
So
So, what are some of your more memorable moments on not necessarily the American Perimeter Trail, but the other trails you've actually run? Like things that you always kind of like remember. These have been pretty outstanding kind of like events.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, good and bad. I had a like an epiphany towards the end of the through hike of the Appalachian Trail that I had done most of that trail alone. So I would see people often, but I didn't camp with people. And a lot of times people have like tramilies, they call them, or like trail families that they'll
Yeah,
travel with people. They just meet out there. Like they don't have to know them beforehand. They just meet people out there. But I didn't do that necessarily during my through hike a lot. And then I realized like when I got to Maine, uh, a guy in a town said, the best thing about this is seeing these things with another person.
yeah,
And I was about to finish the trail by myself, and I was like, wow, this is lonely, for the blood that was shared. It's a lonely view. And I learned a lesson from that, which was like, people are important in your life. I know that sounds strange coming from me because I just spent the last year and a half alone, but things like that are mundane, they're not necessarily spectacular, but they're like little lessons and things that you get to see yourself. Like in that moment, I got to recognize myself and got to ask some questions about relationships in my life. But as far as the highlights, there's so many amazing places to visit. I don't necessarily rank them based on what they're supposed to be. So it's just my particular experience on that day. Like, for instance, the Grand Canyon is incredible, but if I went there and my experience was kind of like, you know,
yeah,
um, like kind of fell flat, or maybe I was going through a personal thing, or the weather, or blah, 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 an injury, whatever have you, that kind of like colors those experiences. So some of the like best experiences haven't necessarily been in the most amazing places. And then the other thing is like, I have so many people that have been absolutely wonderful to me over the last 20 years. But I do remember like the guy in Texas that shot at me during this trip. Like I do remember that because it got my attention, and
yeah,
like I wouldn't like to remember that more so than the like how all the gratitude that I have for all the people who were so kind to me, but it does stick out in my mind. And I would say this, like as far as peak experiences, I've had harder trips than some of what I experienced on this last one. I've had some like climbing trips that were more dangerous, more risky, a lot of risk, big reward. Um, but honestly, like the peak experience probably in all of my backpacking was this pandemic, because it took every piece of my backpacking guidebook to be able to hike safely and ethically during that time.
yeah,
So it was kind of like this culmination. I didn't think on the APT I was going to get challenged that hard. I knew that all my skills would get tested at some point in time, but I had no idea I was coming up against that, because when I left in 2019, July of 2019, and there was no pandemic. So, um, and then things in my country just began to kind of deteriorate while I was out there. So much civil strife, political strife, and the pandemic.
yeah,
So, but basically, like during that time, the pandemic, for several months, I went into isolation, and in order to do that, it's not something I would recommend for someone starting backpacking. Like I wouldn't even really recommend you going by yourself. And I know I do that, um, but that was probably the pandemic was the peak experience, because it really removed me from society.
yeah,
Because like when I hiked the Triple Crown initially, going through that process, we didn't have smartphones at that point in time. So um, all the equipment that people use to backpack now simply wasn't available then. So you were kind of cut off from society anyways. But nowadays, you don't have to be if you don't want to be. Like there's devices and things you can use to stay connected out there, and people do. I have to because of my work.
Yeah.
Like if I wasn't doing the professional backpacking piece, I wouldn't have to be on social media. Like there wouldn't be any need. Like, you know, I could share it with friends and family, but otherwise, like a lot of my hikes are just vacations for me. So I just
Yeah.
kind of be sharing like more of a vacation, because that's like I tell people it doesn't have to be fun to be fun.
Yeah.
So like it may not be fun, but it's a lot of fun for me. And you understand that. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying there, Damien. And so like the purpose of sharing this one going forward is really the work around the conference, the American Perimeter Trail Conference, and sharing this with as many people as possible so we can get this what I think is going to end up probably being about 14,000 miles of trail on the ground. Um, and I'm so blessed to be in that position.
No, brilliant. So you mentioned that the isolation. So so how do you kind of like manage remaining positive and motivated when you're kind of like, as you said, out on these trails, kind of like all by yourself, for an extended period of time? Because a lot of people will be going,
Mm.
I'm used to being around a lot of people, and suddenly I'm not going to be around a
Mhm.
lot of people. So how do you keep yourself positive?
It's tough, especially because a lot of those times I didn't have any money and I wasn't fully funded. So I'm like alone in the middle of nowhere, traveling far away from home. I didn't leave any possessions back home. Like when I left, I cut ties because I knew I might be gone for a couple years. So
Yeah,
I didn't want to have stuff in storage or whatever. I mean, I haven't owned a vehicle in over a decade. Um, and so I pretty much like when I decided to go, I kind of took a huge risk there. So like being alone, that sucked. Like being far away from home, not having any support there, not knowing if you're going to be able to fund the rest of this project. Those were stressful times. Um, I had the route wasn't decided before I left. I had a rough route, but I always knew I wasn't going to follow that. I knew I would just make decisions as I went because I wasn't beholden to anything besides what my concept of what the American Perimeter Trail should be. And it's
yeah,
just my idea. Um, so, like, I knew I was going to be making changes the whole time. And so I left my home in Oregon, went down into California, and was able to hike with a photojournalist for like a week or two, and that was great. But then she went back to her country, and the next year, over a year, I was by myself. So by the time I got to the east coast of America, like walked the whole way across the country, I was approaching the Appalachians, and I wasn't real interested in the Appalachian Trail as far as the APT because it wasn't informative for the long-term project, because I already know the Appalachian Trail really well. I've been up and down it, like I know that trail. It wasn't new information. So I was going to purposely use other trails besides the AT to try to find a way up through the Appalachians, a little used route or
yeah,
something. And but by the time I got to the Appalachians, I was questioning whether or not how I wanted to do this, because I had just been alone for so long, um, that I thought, well, maybe I'll go up the Appalachian Trail and weave in and out. So if there's other trails and things I want to go check out, I'll go hike those. But I'll spend some time on the the Appalachian Trail, even if it's just for a week, so I can be around some like people
yeah,
for more than 5 minutes, have an actual like conversation, like like-minded people. Like I haven't seen another backpacker and forever, and so like it's lonely when I go into town sometimes too, because people think that I'm a vagrant. Like they don't look at me and be like, that's a professional backpacker and he's creating like America's next conservation effort. They're like thinking, what is he going to steal or take from us?
yeah,
Like hide your kids and hide your stuff. And anyways, and it wasn't like that always, so don't get me wrong.
yeah,
But But yeah, I mean, as far as it's just like a very varied and dynamic experience I had out there, and I haven't been able to voice a lot of this well. But during the pandemic, uh, that wasn't an option. So I got to the Appalachian Trail, and they asked all long distance hikers to leave the Appalachian Trail, to suspend any long distance hikes. So um, there was an ethical question there of going up that way,
Yeah.
but I really wanted to spend some time on there, but it was purely selfish. I just wanted to be around like people for like a day or two or
Yeah.
something, like that's all I wanted. But then when I got there, the trail was closed, and then I had to stay in isolation going the whole way up the Appalachian. So like resupply was tricky. Um, I didn't have a guidebook for the entire trip. I primarily just used maps, which is not something you would do on a normal trip. You would have, hopefully, you would have more information
Yeah.
than that at your disposal. But as far as like, yeah, the peak experience, I mean, I could write a whole story just about what occurred during that little section of the entire trip, because it was just, I mean, on the surface, it was like several months without people, without
Yeah.
electronic devices, without social media, without contact with the outside world, without showers, without laundry, without a hot meal, um, without any restaurants. So um, I think that really started to affect my health
Yeah.
on many levels, and I knew that I'd already been alone for so long, but I knew this extra piece of isolation that I was about to experience was going to be like next level. And so I read about it. So I read about what happens to people under those conditions. And it's always the same. They have anxiety and depression, and some people start going a little crazy, like believing things that aren't true because there's no one around to challenge them. So you see this whether a person's sitting in a jail cell or they're like on a remote island somewhere. And so I knew, I hoped by knowing some of that I would avoid maybe the punch or the cut, the
Yeah.
knife's edge of that. But I really was unable to. I mean, at the end of the day, I was just another human being. I wasn't a superhuman that doesn't have feelings or emotions or yearn for human connection. I mean, I'd say I can go a long time without it,
Yeah.
but I, at the end of the day, I'm still, after a year, is kind of still really starting to affect me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I can understand. So I guess like the one advantage you did have, you have this dream or overarching kind of like objective that kind of like pulls you along. Like so,
That's right.
at least you're working towards something. So at least you had that to keep you going. Like the examples you mentioned, like being stuck on an island or in a prison, you kind of like don't have any kind of like objective or goal at the end of it. So that makes it even more self-defeating, doesn't it? You kind of like just have a lot more negativity.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I appreciate you making that point, delineating those there. I, I I knew before I started the trip that if it was just a recreational trip for me, or if it was just a self promotion trip, like, oh, I'm gonna go do something like over the top to try to get famous, that I wouldn't have made it probably very far, because it doesn't motivate me.
Yeah.
And like as far as the recreational trip, you know, about a year, I think would be a good trip for me, but going into like the year and a half, and now I still have 3,000 miles left, is like it's a long for one trip like this. But
Yeah.
um, I knew this just from other long distance backpacking, that if it was just like, if my intention was something else, that it was going to fizzle out, and by the end it was going to be like, just get this over with. It's kind of lost its value. But for me, it's like it's always been the people and the places and the open spaces that draw me along. But for a trip this long, the APT, the forming of the conference and the 501c3 really helped me, especially on rough days. And because, like I said, just as far as recreation or like trying to build a hiking resume or something, or get people to like me, that's not enough motivation for me to do this. Like I don't care about those things enough. But if you start talking to me about conservation, then you have my ear and
Yeah.
you have my attention, and I'm all in with you, and I'll do like anything. I'll go to any limits
Okay.
because it's my flow
Yeah.
then at that point.
No,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Mhm.
So, so now, like, what's your definition of adventure? You know, like a lot of people would say you lead a pretty adventurous life compared to a lot of other people. So what's your definition of adventure?
You know, it's this kind of curiosity that you bring with you in everything that you do. So, um, I'm having a wonderful challenge around that right now because I'm having a break back in Bend, Oregon. And I got back here and everything was closed down. So it hasn't been like, it's not the same life that I left here.
Yeah.
You know, I had like very social in some ways and involved in my community before I left. And then, of course, like when I got back here, things were different. But I think that curiosity you bring into things and be in the present. So, like right now, my mind is wanting to jump to this spring and summer to the backpacking trip. Like, I want to be on trail
Yeah.
and totally pass over this experience I'm having right now. Like, I'm already gone, you know, in my mind. And I think you can do this with vacation. You know, you've been working and it, the weeks are wearing down and it's almost vacation time and you're almost kind of there already,
Yeah.
you know? And you're missing the entire moment that's happening right in front of you. So for me, I feel like I mean, I've done this. Like I feel like most days I could write kind of an adventure story because something weird happens to me on most days. Now, I put myself out there. So so when you put yourself out there, you're not going to have a normal experience. Even
Yeah.
people who travel don't have the same experience. You could be backpacking and one person's like, we met all these awesome people and then we went and did this and then we resupplied and these people in this organic farm and then we went there and we went to this concert. And other people will be like, we didn't meet anyone, you know, nothing happened. Um, so it's kind of like how open are you to the experience, or are you wanting to stick to your plan? You
Yeah.
know, your vacation is so planned out that it's not leaving room for things that are synchronistic or serendipitous
Yeah.
to occur. So as far as like the adventurer is a person who's curious
Yeah.
and they will see adventure and all sorts of things. It's the observation and the perspective that's the adventure, not the actual activity. And I mean, that's not totally true. Like some adventure will definitely get your heart
Yeah. No,
going,
definitely.
or it could be a life-changing experience. Like I get that, but I think the adventure spirit is just the curiosity. You just want to see it. You just want to be there. You
Yeah.
just want to be there, see it, and feel it. And I feel like so much of our lives are run by emotions. It's so much for better and for worse. We live rich emotional lives, whether we like, you know, for myself, whether I want to explore those or not. Um, and so it's just like the adventure a lot of times I think is coming from the way the experience is projected and not really something you can cultivate besides take some risk.
Yeah.
You know, if you're traveling, pretty much the point where you become afraid is kind of where your experience is meeting an adventure.
Yeah.
And that could be just trying to like find a hostel in Hong Kong. You know, I don't know what your day's adventure is going to be. We had to jump on this boat to this to that or whatever, but at some point in time where there's a little bit of fear that comes up, some uncomfortability, but then pleasure with that as well, you're in an adventure.
Yeah. So, well, based on that, you're definitely an advocate for people getting out and out of their comfort zone, being a little bit more curious and trying to include a bit more adventure in their life.
We're gonna have to. We're gonna have to if we want to have the global society that's happening, whether we want it to or not.
Yeah.
Um, People are going to need to get out of your comfort. I mean, we all need to get out of our comfort zones. I'm doing it a lot. I don't always like it. Like I told you, it doesn't have to be fun to be fun, but
Yeah.
squaring ourselves, taking our corners and walking away to our corners and squaring ourselves up in our boxes, it's not going to work anymore. This world is so integrated. How beautiful. What a wonderful experience. And there's downsides to that. You know, like a lot of days when I'm doing work for the conference, I talk with people all day and I don't see any of these people in person. Like they're all over the place.
Yeah.
I just see them on Zoom. But then again, it's like I get to do my work because of that advantage. And um, I I don't think there's it's I know that it's easy to be comfortable. And trust me, there were times after being out there for a year that I was like, I don't want to travel anymore. I want to find a nest. I want to make like a big nest. This is what I pictured in my mind, like a big nest in Bend, Oregon, and like climb in there and just like have people bring me soup for the rest of my life. Like I was really just wanted to feel secure and
Yeah.
in like a place that wasn't moving all the time. Um, but I just, you know, people, I mentioned this earlier about the connection with each other. And so I think many people would be surprised that maybe they think they're going outdoors to find themselves or commune with nature. And they do all of that, but um, the relationships and, I mean, you could meet someone on a trail for a weekend and never forget that person for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And you guys never see each other again. Um, there's these sorts of things happening for us all over the place. And if you're a person who wants to fall in love, and like I said, it doesn't have to be with a person, but maybe you just want to fall in love with yourself or with your life and your life after, you know, living the legend after 40,
Yeah.
um, then you're going to have to get uncomfortable somewhere because whatever you're doing right now, your routine is not, it's not putting you in the place to meet that other piece.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like, um, and I know that's hard. I know that's difficult to get out of our habits and what we're used to. And someday I'm going to have to probably, maybe I'll stop long distance backpacking and that'll be an adjustment for me then.
Yeah.
But I know before we started, we were talking a little bit about um, people as they approach like another chapter in their life. And what I notice here in my town is that uh, people my age, and I'm 41, people my age nowadays, there's some who are they are, the children are leaving the house and they're looking to that next chapter, you know, their children are becoming adults. And then there's like a whole other group of friends that they're just starting their families now at 40. So we've really kind of redefined uh, what is the normal or what is usual.
Yeah.
And um, I'm not like by doing this, I don't feel like it's a midlife crisis. Is it maybe like a little bit of an existential disturbance? Certainly, like I wanted to mix some things up in my life, but I don't really, it's not fair for me to make judgments about other people's experience. I can only talk about mine because I never got married and I never had children. I didn't have a family. I wanted to. I almost did once
Yeah.
upon a time. I got close, but there's been no takers since. So, anyways, the point is, I do have freedoms. You know, I'm not beholden to my material possessions, and I'm not responsible for another human being's life. Um, but with that being said, like, even though I have that freedom, I had to go through so many limiting beliefs. Damien, if this works in both directions. So, as far as starting the APT and forming the conference, I could have done this. I thought about this 10 years ago
Yeah.
and I could have done it then, but I had a series of limiting beliefs that they took me 10 years to get over. It took what it took, you know, um, and it's interesting if you have like in my situation, if you would have me state a goal, like I want to do X, and then I were to list like the reasons why I can't achieve that right now, most of those are just beliefs. Like they're not really based in anything.
Yeah.
They may be observations you've made from the world, but just because you've observed something 20 times over doesn't mean that the 21st time that it's not completely different. So, like for me, the life, um, you know, part of my process here is removing those limiting beliefs. And I just completely challenged it. I didn't have the $30,000 to do this trip or to start the conference or to do any of this. I didn't have the social media support. Um, I had no social media support. I didn't have a community built around this. I had all old used gear. My gear was older. It was like 140 years old when you counted it up. Um, and I went because it wasn't the right time, and I knew it was never going to be the right time
Yeah.
because it hadn't been the right time the 10 years before that. And when I left, um, one of my best friends died when I left, and I had oral surgery. Like I had stitches all through my mouth. I had to boil my food so I could drink everything while I was backpacking for the first couple weeks. And that's one more example of something where I would have put it off a couple more weeks, and then like winter would have came. Well, I live in the West, and that
Yeah.
doesn't work too well in the mountains. So then winter would have came, and then the pandemic would have came, and I wouldn't have left, and we wouldn't be having this conversation, and there'd be no conference. So it's kind of the day that never comes. If you wait for yourself to check all the boxes, um, it just won't happen. And I think I'm proof of a person that if you took my checklist, I was missing major components and said it doesn't matter. And anyone, I mean, anyone looking at me like thought I wasn't speaking to them with a straight face. They thought I was being reckless. Well, that's their opinion,
Yeah.
and I think they were wrong. I think what I, um, but I would probably feel the same way if I saw someone doing what I've been doing. So it's really like eliminating those limiting beliefs, because what we think, like what I think they are, is they're an actual limitation that actually really exists in the world. Like, oh well, I don't have enough money. Well, you can see, like, look at my bank account. I don't have enough money. Like, this is
Yeah.
not something I just made up in my mind. There's a physical, something here in the physical world, a number that matches this, that is a representative of I don't have the resources.
Yeah.
And I laugh in the face of that, because your future self will thank you if you laugh at that person who's making decisions out of fear. Okay? And you just have to know, like, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but it means you're going to have one hell of a ride.
Yeah.
And just know, and if you want to have one hell of a ride, but failure, whatever that means for you, is not in the picture, you're not going to have one hell of a ride.
Yeah.
It's got to be like, I'm okay with failure. I'm fine. I'm just going to go in and see here. And like I said, is it reckless? In my opinion, it's not. In my opinion, it's forward thinking. In my opinion, it's innovative. In my opinion, it's more of the mind of Einstein when he was working on things that he couldn't prove, or maybe never would be able to prove,
Yeah.
but could see, this mechanism in the functioning of the universe, and took a chance on expressing that. Now, I'm certainly not any Einstein. That's not what I'm saying. But this idea of your future self, and I'm not talking about living in the future, because obviously I've said, like, that just tramples all over the present moment. But if you can picture your future self and see how they're going to be annoyed that maybe you didn't do something because it was going to cost a couple $100 or something, like, there's this maybe there's a conference or something that you've always wanted to participate and be a part of, but I don't know, it's a lot of money, and well, I'm not sure. You're getting the message to participate in this, and you're talking yourself out of it because it's safe. But why not go take the ride, and then you'll just have to deal with the consequences. And it may be that you made a really bad decision, but but I've made every bad decision on this trip and it's working out. Isn't this great? Like, I've made so many bad decisions, and the perfection of that, the perfection of the decisions that seem horrible at the time or have consequences.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here before you right now, not being regretful for any of it, you know?
No, no, it's a good perspective. Because, like as you said, a lot of people create these barriers from them actually trying to do something, and then all successes in society have been from people who have imagined something that perhaps wasn't possible, and then
Mhm.
went off and tried it, and we're willing to
Mhm.
take that risk. And then I guess a lot of us are too scared to kind of imagine possibilities and then go off and try to make them into kind of like reality. And then we kind of limit ourselves and then prevent us actually having the full life we possibly could have because, oh, maybe it won't work. I don't have all of these things. And then we just get stuck and we don't move forward. So we kind of live the same life as we've been living and nothing changes.
Yeah,
So,
and I, like I said, I do that all the time.
yeah,
I'm just as human as everyone else, but I have had a little bit of insight that allows me to go for as if. So I don't have the whole plan, I don't have everything together, but I'll go forth as if. I don't really put that much like emphasis on planning. I think preparedness is a lot more important. And the only way to be prepared is to have experience. And the only way to have experience is to go do something.
yeah.
so, um, so, as far as like my life, um, like I said, the issues with the money feel real concrete, like they exist out here in the world, but it's just it's just a belief that you've made up that you're not a person that can do something or you won't have something. I'm not saying there aren't other limitations in life, because of course there are, but work with what you can um, manage,
Yeah,
and you can work with your own beliefs. You can't work with other people's beliefs, you can't work with the world or how things are, but you can work with your own beliefs. And really, it's as easy as that. If people, because I think people sometimes want to find out what's different about me than other people, and that's the only thing that's not even different from me and other people, but the person before I went on the APT um, wasn't willing to take these sorts of risks or chance or have this sort of
yeah,
faith, and then the person who did is walking that way. It's the same person, but they just have a slightly little different view and
yeah,
perspective. So, and I mean, and this is coming from a person who suffered with depression and anxiety. So it's not like I'm not haphazard. It's not like I'm missing my amygdala like some climbers and they just don't feel fear or like,
yeah,
they just don't get elevated. I'm not that person. I get an opportunity to actually feel all of those emotions and all those doubts. I mean, go walk by go hike by yourself for a year, and your mind, I mean, the amount of doubt that will come up, it'll just say all sorts of things. Like,
yeah,
it might say you're wonderful, you're amazing, but it almost like say like you're ugly, no one likes you. Why don't you go home? No one cares. What are you doing? This is ridiculous. Grow up. All of
yeah,
it. And the only growing up that I need to do, for me, this is just like my personal choice, is not like what I need to establish out here in the world. For me, like the growing up, the maturing that I do comes from the inside. It's not necessarily from the position that I hold, even though
yeah.
that is a good, even though that is a good facilitation along my trajectory and my evolution is trying to be a more holistic person.
No, very good. So no, it's an interesting perspective. Like as you said, like you define your own life. It's up to you to kind of like make the decisions, and you got to encounter or get over those beliefs that are holding you back if you really want to have the life that you potentially could have. So otherwise you will have regrets later on. So as you said, even if you make bad decisions and they don't pan out, at least you tried, so you won't have a regret, because you don't have that regret, I wish I should have done something, but now you've
Yeah,
gone off and done something. So you don't have any regrets. The only thing is, well, it didn't work. Okay, well, I'll try something else.
yeah. And I want to be sensitive here because people do have limitations and I do as well. So I'm not saying like anybody can just go do anything. It's not what I'm saying. But let your heart and your let your heart direct you. And if it's directing you to do something, it's probably the right direction. And
Yeah,
then, I mean, it's just like also I thought my backpacking, long distance backpacking, I thought was over in my 30s because I have multiple fractures through my foot, my ankle, and my leg. And I have hardware in there. And so I thought that was the end. And if I didn't challenge it, that would have been the end. That would have been it. Like I would probably not be walking very normal right now. So, I mean, I give a lot of credit to your own mind
yeah,
and what you're able to do. That's not me saying that like people aren't doing enough. I'm just like saying that I'm not even doing enough. Like I'm coming online and having awareness around what my capacities are. And I've always had these same capacities. That's the crazy thing. Like,
yeah,
I could always add 2 + 2 or whatever it is, but I haven't shined because of my limiting beliefs.
yep,
And if I'm real like careless, I'll blame it on other people too.
yep,
Because it's never gonna, it may be true. It may be other people's fault, but it's not gonna get you where you're going. They'll go off and have a wonderful life, or maybe it's an institution that you have a resentment or a group. And they'll go on and they'll be fine while you're suffering over it or feeling limited by it. So I'm not saying like real limitations don't exist. They do. And that's why I mentioned at the beginning, like I'm so grateful that I had access
yep,
because not everyone has that. Like I'm blessed in these ways. But it's interesting for me personally during this journey is to see how many limiting beliefs I have.
yeah,
And it starts off with I am this, or well, I'm always like this, or I always do it that way, or I just kind of without ever questioning, well, is that why? Because I've come to realize like a lot of my thoughts aren't even mine. It was just like any animal conditioned into the environment and the culture and the society in which, or the band or the herd
yeah,
in which I came from. So a lot of this stuff isn't even mine. And it's like coming to be this age and realizing like the conflict that exists there between the true essence and then the conditioned essence is just like stuff I picked up all over the place. I don't even know where it came from.
yep.
I mean, it could be liking mustard. Like, I don't know why I like mustard. Well, you grew up in a mustard region. So
No, no, very true. Like I think I don't know. I think it might be Buddhism or whatever. It talks about um, you're not really who you are. Like because like basically there is no unchangeable essence of who you are. It's like everything can change. So like lots of us, as you were going, saying I am this person, I'm the type of person who does this, and all of these kind
mhm.
of things, but they're not really true because there is nothing impermeable, there's nothing that's unchangeable about you. Everything you are is a product of all the experiences you have. So if you now changed all those experiences, you can become something completely different if you're willing to be open to open like you are to try new experiences. So then you can change that identity that you've created about yourself if you're willing to do it. And then, I guess when we reach 40, a lot of us feel afraid to change because we believe this is who we are. And then if we go outside of this, we're not really being ourselves, but who we are at 40 isn't necessarily who we are. It's like a product of all those experiences. And then, maybe that isn't who we really are. Maybe the essence of who we are was when we were a kid, when we had these dreams and aspirations, and then we've put them away and shelved them because of all of these other inputs. And then maybe we're not going to live who we really are because we're living something else. So, and I guess at 40, hopefully, which seems like you've been able to do, we kind of like realize this is all rubbish. We don't have to worry
Mhm.
about this. Like, you know, we don't have to worry about what other people think. We don't have to worry what our parents think at age 40 anymore. We don't have to worry about that teacher who was telling us to do X, Y, Z. And we definitely don't have to worry about society because we've worked out society isn't necessarily the best thing. I mean, there's lots of imperfection there. So, you know, at 40, maybe we should like be going, well, now it's time to be who we really are, like to try and
That's
find it out.
that's exactly, you know, Damien, I love what you said there. And so, you know, I am not a realized person. So just know that when I speak about this, I'm in process just like everyone else.
Yeah.
But but I say that with a caveat. I am in process because there are people who are not. And maybe that's what you're talking about a little bit. Is like it's great. You can build up this identity and this definition. And if you existentially don't have an issue with it, or someday it doesn't all come crashing down like, oh my God, this has all been a lie, good. And then you can ride that to your death.
Yeah.
But but if it starts unfolding, you hit 40 and it starts unfolding, it's time to do some work because
Yeah.
you're gonna get forced into it, whether you want to or not. And that's the time, you know, this is very much the time for discovering who you are. When I was 20, people would say like, oh, you're going on these trips and stuff, discover, you know, a young man discovering who he was. It's not really true. I was learning more about the world during some of those travels than anything. I didn't have a lot to work with, honestly. You know, I like, until you're an adult, this isn't true for everyone's experience, but um, you know, if you have a supportive family, it's a being a kid's a totally different experience, and that's all the information you have. You
Yeah.
don't know what it's like to really care for other people, or to like have the grown-up stresses that come with that responsibility, of having a career or having possessions. So, you know, my teacher always tells me that there needs to be a process in which you find out who you are not. And that is the only way to find out who you are. So I don't go on backpacking trips to find out who I am. I go on backpacking trips to find out who I am not. And when, for me, I feel like I have enough adult experience here to begin to approach that process of finding out who I am now. But it's taking a lot of finding out who I am not. And when I say that, just know that it doesn't mean that I like the notness was bad. It just means it wasn't mine. It didn't mean that I robbed a bank and I was like, it turns out I'm not really a bank robber. You know,
Yeah.
it's not that sort of thing. It's just maybe you think that um, maybe you spent a bunch of time being a wonderful person and you come to terms with like you're not really that wonderful of a person, but it's really important for like for other people to view you that way. You know, you're not as genuine as you thought you were. That's okay. Or maybe you're more genuine, and it's just been like, you know, the environment that you've been around, you've had to be other than who you are. um, we find this with people in their professions having to wear the professional hat,
Yeah.
and it's a different person than their personal life, and sometimes the professional person takes over. um, and so I've been finding out who I am not, and I've done it hard. Like I've done it really hard. So that's why I feel so blessed now, because I feel like my process is turning more to the who I actually am, because I did the not part really good.
Yeah. Good.
it wasn't it wasn't always fun, you know.
No, understood. So maybe this is a good lead into actually talking about the American Perimeter Trail because you spent a number of years kind of like thinking about doing it, but then you never actually did it because of these limiting beliefs that you had set up.
Mhm.
So how did you go about, so number one, first, I guess, like everyone, be interested to learn a little bit more about what exactly the project is, and then how it kind of, incubated for a period of time, and then,
Mhm.
what you're hoping to achieve with it.
Great. So, I mean, initially, like I said, it was over 10 years ago. I had a vision. It was just a normal day. I was at work and I just saw I saw the trail, like I saw the map and I saw me backpacking it. And I was just like, what, that would be great. That'd be wonderful. And my first thought was like, oh, that would be such an interesting, fascinating journey to discover and explore America and all that is. And and it's what I love to do. So, and then within that thought was also like, but that trail doesn't exist and you should create it, you know? Um, in order to do the kind of work that I do, you know, part of it is there's a lot of like normal sacrifices that I make in life. In other
Yeah.
words, like I'm not settled, you know, I'm mobile. I'm a mobile person. Relationships are difficult. Um, uh, just like setting up a normal kind of situated, stable life is just not what I'm doing right now. So I sacrifice that, but that's a choice that I've made. You know, I'm not a victim to that or anything, but you know, part of me not having a family and stuff right now, you know, I have this other life uh, because of that. So, anyways, years went on. Every once in a while, I'd revisit it. I was almost I think I honestly, I think I was almost looking for permission, and I don't know what that means, but I think I was seeking some validation and permission to do this and outside validation from other people. And so I'd think about doing it and then I'd be like, well, this is bad timing, or this is impossible. Like I won't make it, or I don't know, someone else could do this, but not me. You know, one of
Yeah.
those limiting beliefs, like someone will do this, but it's not me. I'm not capable or something along those lines. And this chatter would go on. And then I would have like a week where I was just like, no, I am going to do this. This is how I'm going to do this. And I would be all in. And by the end of the week, I'd be so exhausted of thinking about it that I'd be like, okay, well, maybe next summer or something. Right.
Yeah.
And, and basically in 2019, or the end of 2018, it got to the point where I just decided I'm never visiting this again. I won't think about this anymore, or I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to sit on the fence. This is creating a lot of suffering in my life because it's like everything is telling me you're supposed to be here doing this. And I like part of me knows it, but is waiting for this permission to actually become who I really already am.
Yeah.
and and there's this other person who's not living that life, and it created a lot of, I'm an artist by nature anyways and a musician, so my backpacking is an expression of my art. And any artist or anyone who's expressing stuff, doing podcast or whatever it is, your work, if that's not coming out in the world and it's getting bottled up, I start to feel depressed and like suffering around that. And so I just knew pretty much. I had a bike accident, bicycle, and I had a TBI, and I quit my job the next day. Um, and pretty much, I didn't make the decision publicly, but at that point, I was like, this is the year. I'm just going to go. I don't have the resources, you know, I don't have everything to do this, but I'm not, I said, I'm either going to just never consider this or absolutely go do it full force. And I would have been okay with either one. I didn't
Yeah.
have to do this. I could have done something else, but it was just this gravitational pull to it. So I quit my job and was like, I guess I'm leaving in a couple months and I'm going to start the American Perimeter Trail Conference and start this backpacking. Um, Now, I had a lot of experience on my side. So when I left here, you know, I told you about the limitations that I had, and they're pretty big
Yeah.
ones, like money, plan, gear. Like these are pretty health, because I just had oral surgery
Yeah.
on my face and stuff. Like these are all pretty big ones, but I knew that the experience that I had would carry me through. And I also was in a very emotionally balanced place, because anyone will tell you in long distance backpacking that it becomes a mental game at some point. Because if you're 500 miles in, you can probably go another 500 miles.
Yeah.
And if you can go another 500 miles, you can probably go another 500 miles. Um, More than likely. I'm not saying something wouldn't happen, but a lot of time what'll take you out is just your mind
Yeah.
and the marvelous magnificent blah, 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 mind. I can't even
Yeah.
say it. And just doubt or depression or these things. A happy person, like my experience has been, even when I've been injured, if I'm happy, I can still have a great experience and hike kind of through it. It's annoying, but
Yeah.
it's manageable. But an emotional insult, I'm just calling it that, or say an emotional injury, uh, is pretty rough. And so
Yeah.
why I was out there, when I decided to do this, I had to be pretty locked in and pretty committed and open to whatever experience came before me, but I would keep going no matter what. And so what did that mean for me was just like, I suffered the grief. I had several friends die while I was out there. I don't know why. I don't know why, like, it wasn't because of the pandemic. Um, I hadn't had that experience before in life. Um, but it just all kind of happened at once. And I was out there alone coping with it as best as I could. But I think like my level of commitment to the long term project of this trail and the love for what I was doing, allowed me to, maybe not heal, but at least manage those situations as best as I could.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a trip from the heart for me. It's been absolutely from my heart, not very much from the head. The head hasn't been very helpful, and the physical body didn't treat me very well some of the time. So whatever, but the heart was what really opened up the experience and allowed for me to continue through that.
Yeah. So the end goal is this trail that circumnavigates the whole of continental America,
Mhm.
and because there's a conservation element to it as well as a
Mhm.
recreation element. So
Mhm.
maybe you can explain a little bit more about, what your vision of all of this is.
Sure. So I always knew that so we are a conservation organization, and that's not uncommon. Some organizations that on their face look like trail organizations are actually officially registered, or their purpose is either they're a political organization or they're a conservation organization. But
Yep.
the work that they do on the front is the trail side. So we're actually a conservation organization, and the way that in which we hope to do that is by creating this trail. And I didn't come up with this. This is the same model. Like for instance, I've mentioned the Appalachian Trail here quite a few times, just hoping that people have some sort of reference to that. That's
Yep.
why I keep coming back to that one. And they are a conservation. They're a conservancy. They are a conservation organization, not a recreation organization. But they appear to be a recreational organization because they support hikers and the trail and all the work that goes into that. And we're similar to that. Like my primary purpose is to preserve a corridor that goes around the perimeter of the United States forever. And the way I intend to do that is by bringing my love of backpacking and being outside and the trail life to that.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is not unusual. Like this is done all the time. Fishing organizations, you could have people who don't even care about the stream, but they like to fish. And so then they care for the stream.
Yeah.
This is the way that this works. And so our ultimate goal is to have a actual footbed that goes around the perimeter of the United States. And like I said, I think it's around 12,000 now. I hope in the future to be more around 14,000 miles. And we seek to do this through partnership with other trail organizations, which we've already formed all throughout the United States. we will be sharing some of their footbed. So
Yep.
there's been trail organizations that have come to me and said, can our trail be part of the American Perimeter Trail? And I'm taking that under consideration. And I don't do this in a bubble because there is a board. And also, when I decided to make this public, I had to hand over the reins. You know, I wanted to do that. I didn't have to do that. I could have just kept this because honestly, not everyone knows where the route is. I'm the only person that knows where a bunch of where I actually went and where the route is. So I have some proprietary rights there, and so does the APT. And we'll bring that information online as it becomes more solid and it's like definite place where I want the route to be.
Yep.
Um, but for right now, we begin the lifelong work and work that will continue well beyond my lifetime in not just creating this, but maintaining it. And then the maintaining work goes on forever.
Yep.
And we're going to be using existing trails. We use also existing fire roads or 2 tracks that already exist, hoping to be able to use some private lands. Of course, those are deals that have not been made yet. And in partnerships with the Forest Service and the National Park Service and the government agencies that manage some of the public lands. In areas where I didn't have trail, I would go cross country. So there's large public land areas that are already in the public sector. In other words, they can be utilized by the public for trail use,
Yep.
but they don't have an existing trail on the ground. So I hiked those places, but there's no signs and I just use the map and compass
Yep.
to do that stuff. I'm not suggesting like people in the future are going to have to do that. They will actually be able to have a guide and a footpath to follow. So that's, you know, the long-term plan, and then also the community engagement. For a project this large, you can't rely on local engagement. In other words, like the epicenter of the trail, because there is none. It's everywhere.
Yep.
So it has to have these satellites, and I'll be spending the next several years setting up those satellites in the different regions that I've set aside that will be all around the country. So there will be offices, satellite offices all around the United States. So we're officially based in my home, which is Bend, Oregon.
Yep.
And then there's all the programs. I mean, we're already doing a lot of community programs. We've had food collection and races and hikes and all sorts of ways for people to contribute and to build these communities around the country, especially in those areas where there isn't a trail community.
Yep.
And there might be a misunderstanding about dirty backpackers or hikers in some areas.
Yeah.
So
So how did you make this kind of happen? Because like you mentioned, you decided, okay, I'm going, I don't have anything in this place, and then I'm going to go hiking. So you're hiking 10,000 miles in parallel, and then you're setting up this organization, which now, after a couple of years, has some kind of structure. It's got people working there. It's got board of directors, as you said. So how did that all come about?
So specifically how I did this is I had a vision, and then I walked like every day, all day, and meditated for months. And it put a lot of things things started aligning around that. And so I took care of my like well-being, my physical health, and my emotional well-being, and the rest of the stuff started falling in. So instead of like doing what we always do, which is take care of everything out here, hoping that it'll like fix what's in here.
Yeah.
You know, I started here and then let the outside come from that. So, you know, that's a good, like, because I've had people contact me and say, I want to do what you do. How do I be a pro backpacker? And I say, well, this week you need to go volunteer and have a regular volunteer commitment at some place every week. And they're like, wait, hold on a second. What does this have anything to do with backpacking?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're just going to have to, I mean, this is the way I did it. You asked. So what happened then is that there was like some community involvement from my community, but I took a big risk. Like I said, I didn't have the gear or the money. I could have had all of that. I could have waited. You know, I could have waited another year and done all of this pretty much in a bubble, like funded all of it and not had to reach out. But the realities of it settled in pretty quickly when I didn't have any money and all my gear was like full of holes and falling apart. Was like, oh, you aren't going to be able to do this in a bubble. Like
Yeah.
I always had the intention of forming the organization with other people and not being a bubble, but my own private experience, I wasn't real like open to inviting anyone into that. And I realized, thank God I didn't have all the resources. I'm so grateful for that because it forced me to have like a whole community that I've developed and people that have become family members and seek out all these sponsors. Some of the sponsors I had before, but I had to get new ones and stuff. It forced me to reach out. And honestly, all I did was like, when I didn't know what to do, when the project seemed like it was out of money and there wasn't anywhere to go, I put one foot in front of the other. And I
Yeah.
did that, you know, we say that metaphorically. I literally just did that. And then angels started to appear in my life. And one of the first ones who came on was my back went out. And I had several medical professionals that I didn't know that deal with backs reach out to me and said, maybe we can do like some Zoom or stuff online, some therapy to help
Yeah.
you so you can continue on your trip. And one of them was a physical therapist. And I started working with her just to help the back so I could continue on. And she ultimately ended up becoming the trip coordinator.
Okay.
And and so now she serves on the board, and another angel came into my life. Her name is Danny, and she now serves as our PR director and also our secretary of the board. So these people showed up, and I didn't ask for them. I didn't put out an ad, like a wanted ad, saying this is what I'm looking for. They showed up they found me,
Yeah.
and then in some way I found them, and I had to trust these people because this is my baby. You know, it was my absolute baby. And when I decided to go public and involve other people, in some way, I'm turning my baby over,
Yeah.
you know, because even though I'm the executive director, they could fire me sometime down the line or whatever, you know. So like,
Yeah.
I really took my baby and handed it over and said, oh my God, you know, I've trusted everything this far. This is really hard. And I just like, you know, it was rough to entrust that. And I did. And many people told me not to do that. And they're like, these people are strangers. People are going to want to take advantage and you better watch the money and they can't have access to this. Well, that's not any way to do business because you want people to have access to money and be able to make decisions without you,
Yeah.
especially if you're in the back country and they can't get a hold of you. So I just kind of like let it be like, you know, I put all this work and time into this. They can take everything. If they take everything, I'm a person that doesn't have a lot to lose. So I'm not that afraid of starting
Yeah.
over or like go ahead and take it. Like I give what I can away anyway. So I mean, um, so what I would say is it's a series of events coming together in which I could not plan. And there's great programs out there. Like I love the fact that you're doing this, Damien. And there's another one that's called How I Built This, and they speak with entrepreneurs and they talk to them about their story. How did you build this? Many of them built it from nothing, and they took risk like I did. They didn't have money to pay the bills. They didn't have like they were making orders they couldn't pay for, all sorts of things. But their future self did thank them. You
Yeah.
know, their future self went, even if it was quick, just a couple months ahead, went, oh man, thank God I made that decision there, even though everything pointed that maybe I shouldn't. So, so like, yeah, the process with this has been, I hate to tell you this because I know people want specific details
Yeah.
on how you do this, but they don't like the answers. And the answers are community is everything, and you are responsible for how you are playing this game in life. It is your game. There's no one else playing it for you. You're going to want to believe that. I'm going to want to believe that. I believe it every day with certain things. But honestly, at the end of the day, it's all on you. And that's a good news, bad news thing. Because the good news is it's all on you.
Yeah.
And the bad news is like, now you're going to have to do something about that because you're responsible. You can't wait for someone to get the promotion or like win the lottery or something like that. I hope these things all happen for you. But for me, I had to be real specific about what my purpose and my job was. And then I stuck to it. And I did my job every day. And people recognized that work and then were attracted to
Yep.
that. So what I think you'll find, hindsight is 2020, and in these experiences where um, pretty much like in most of those stories that I've heard, it's this thing around not stopping a minute before the miracle happens.
Yep.
Okay? And for me, it's like that's why I continue on, because I know what's happening here is a miracle, which is unique, but at the same time, miracles happen
Yep.
all the time. And so, like, the point is that I don't quit 1 minute before the miracle, because we will never know. I mean, how many excursions or businesses fail in the first year? We don't know how many of them, if they held on for 2 more days, that they would have maybe made it.
Yep.
Like, it may have been that close. So, you're going to have to believe in yourself, because no one else is going to necessarily. They will in time, maybe. But until then, there's a lot of responsibility. And this is part of my growing up experiences. I didn't have a responsibility for myself growing up. Then I became an adult and I didn't know who I was to be
Yep.
responsible with what I was given. And now I'm coming into that age where I have some more ideas about who I am. And that increases the responsibility that I have. And I have a couple of responsibilities here. That is, I want to do something meaningful with this short time that I get to spend here. It's only
Yep.
a flash. And the other thing is, um, I want to have some fun before I freaking die. Like, and sometimes that's just my excuse. If someone would say, like, well, that seems reckless, or maybe that's not the right thing to do here. I'm like, hey, I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but I'm just like gonna have some fun before I get out of here.
Yeah.
And that's a mindset, because backpacking can be no fun at all. It can just be a job, especially the distance. It can just become a job. I have to do this many miles today.
Yep.
I have to do X, Y, Z. Oh, you're looking ahead. Okay, tomorrow's a mail drop. Tomorrow's resupply. Okay, then I go to this town. Then I have to have this sent there. Then this happens. Um, it can just become a job. But I'm like really determined, even if it hurts me, to try to have some fun.
Yep.
And that's a new thing for me, because I spent a lot of my 30s thinking that a broken heart would kill you, which is not true. Yeah, I mean, it does happen to people. You can die of a broken heart, but you don't have to. It's not the end. It's okay. You can have several of them in a lifetime.
Yeah.
It's fine. You will go on. Um, and it's like this with many things, where I just don't know how I'll bounce back from this. But when you get to be a little bit older, hopefully you've had those experiences where you didn't know the way forward, or there was no way forward, yet here you are. So
Yep.
there was. So you were wrong. You were wrong once again. And I just, like I said, if I can inspire people through what the ideas or the practices or spiritual mentality behind this in order to do what I do, that's what I'm really interested in with my journey. Specifically, people do ask me like specific questions about technical aspects
Yeah.
of backpacking, and I'm happy to explain all of that. Um, but there are people who acquire a lot of this knowledge not experientially, through reading or through, like, there's people now that qualify themselves as long distance backpackers because they've watched a lot of YouTube videos, and that's from their voice, not from me saying that. Like, that's not my judgment. That's like, I read where people say, like, I know a lot about this. I've seen hundreds of YouTube videos on it, and I just I don't do, like, that's never been my process with it. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, and if you just like doing that, I think there's nothing, maybe that's your hobby as well. I think that's great. You know, you can
Yeah.
check out my trips if you if you want to. But I have people just this past week, two people who are, you know, a little bit older than me, and they're coming to these times in their life where the kids are out of the house. um, they can make, they're flexible in their careers, because they've worked hard.
Yep.
So now they have some flexibility to do that. And they've been innovative. So the flexibility has come from some innovation, and they want to do some things and they just can't. Like, you know, two of them want to go travel around, and one wants to do like camper van and, you know, or RVing or something like that. Like, and nothing's holding them back but the belief that they're not going to do it right. They're going to do it wrong. And if they would just adopt the belief that they absolutely are going to do it wrong, they'd
Yeah.
feel a lot better about it. Like, just go into it knowing you're going to screw the whole thing up, and that's all right. Like, you'll do it better next time, maybe.
Yeah.
But there's also this thing, what I talked about, the curiosity and the spirit of a writer. And the spirit of a writer is like, there is nothing bad that happens in life. Like, it's all just kind of a story, you know? It all makes for a good story in the end. And
Yep.
so sometimes when I'm out on trail, I put myself in that moment where this moment right here, right now, I'm not real happy with, but I know this will pass and it'll be a funny story down the road.
Yeah.
It's just not terribly funny right now.
No, that's a good outlook. Like, you know, yeah, like, as you said, like your life is really a story, isn't it? Like, you're just writing different chapters in them. So, doesn't matter if it's you know, an adventure, or it could be a nightmare, it could be a horror story, it could be a bit of romance in there, whatever. It's a story. So, like,
It's
you
a
know,
story.
yeah, don't get too tied up with it. So, you know, the only responsibility you have is to go out there and try to create more material for the story. So,
That's it. And you know, some of you listening, if you want to challenge yourself, like, you know, I had a friend and he wanted to challenge himself by doing an overnight camping by himself. Well, he left the trailhead and he hiked into the woods and like started setting up camp, and then he packed up and went back to his car and went home.
yeah,
You know, it wasn't it wasn't his thing, but he found out, you know. um I mean, I mean, it's probably a nice spot to like think that you're something.
yeah,
Like, you know, he may have thought like, oh, I really love this, I really enjoy this, and he went out there and was like, oh no, this is weird, there's like strange noises all over the place, like this is not fun. I'm not going to sleep tonight. but you know, I so respect him because he went and found out,
yep,
you know, one way or the other. And you certainly don't have to do what I'm doing to step out of the comfort zone, you know,
no,
just a little bit, a little by little. So like I said, those two people that I was talking about that are looking to travel and have like a different life experience, honestly, you know, I'm trying to tell them, and they know this. It's interesting. They know the only thing that's holding them back is a belief, but it's that powerful
yep,
that it's just telling them they're not going to do it right. You know, something bad's going to happen, or they're not qualified. Well, like, no one's really qualified for that unless you grew up in a van.
yeah,
You know, like, there's only one way to be qualified for that, is to go, is unfortunately to go do it,
yep,
you know.
definitely.
Hmm.
So now, like, there's a question I like to ask most people. So, what's your definition of a legendary life or your best life?
Hmm. Um, so again, this is only new for me in the last, I mean, I've had experiences with this throughout my life, but for me, it's you, um, like I talked about that creative piece.
Yep,
So for me, a big part of the living legend is living truth. You know, it's not, I'm not, when I go out to backpack, even if it's for an extended period of time, I'm not trying to live above something. I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. I'm not trying to even really like do something harder that's beyond me just to see how far I can push myself. It's more about me living my truth, whatever that is.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know why I got dropped this one. I mean, I have my days where I'm like, that was a practical joke. Like, you know, your life's work and your vision, like, couldn't I've got one like where, I don't know, maybe you have a girlfriend or like a warm home or something? Like, you know, I have my days, and then other days I'm so glad that I don't. But
Yeah.
I think the living the legend is living the truth. And in living the truth, you're going to have to suffer the limiting beliefs, and they're going to be painful to get over. And a lot of people, like as far as what I do, just disqualify themselves physically right off the bat. You know, physically they just discount themselves. And
Yeah.
what you know from our little conversation before is that this is not that sort of thing. Like, there's not a type for hikers or backpackers. It's all sorts of people, athletic and non-athletic, um, parasport athletes and non-parasport athletes.
Yeah.
So there's not really a type here. So I think like living the legend is first finding the truth, and then unfortunately, if you're willing to find the truth, there comes a responsibility with that, or there's going to be a large amount of suffering, or
Yeah.
both, right? So find the truth, see it in your mind, and let it happen in the world. That's the living legend.
Yeah.
That's what, I mean, ultimately, we admire people that do amazing, incredible things, right? But there's a part of us that's just like inspired by the fact that they even tried in the first place. You know, that they, you don't even see yourself, well, I could never do that. Well, I mean, how do you know you could never do that? Have you ever
Yeah.
done that? There's no way of finding that out. So the limitations of your age, um, believe it or not, like 40 is a great opportunity to explore those limits, because this is what we'll find with like aging athletes too, especially with like um, sports that take stamina,
Yeah.
um, that people actually become more engaged, more aware of their body as they become older, and more in tune with the process of whatever the physical process is that they're going through. And they actually maybe can perform better than their 20-year-old self, because their 20-year-old self just didn't know how the whole machine worked
Yeah.
yet. It was figuring it out. So as far as like the age, I would be careful around there. I mean, are you only as old as you feel? I don't think so, because I feel like crap all the time. So I don't think you're as old. I don't think you're as old as you feel. Um, I think you're as old as you think you
Yeah.
are. I think the belief there again is just so important in facing yourself up to the reality. And the reality is that it is constantly changing. And though it's had mileposts, our human evolution here is changing dramatically just from the process, you know, just from looking at the perspective of life expectancy and what people are capable of doing. There's people out there long distance backpacking right now that are amputees,
Yeah.
leg amputees, you know? So be careful again around those limiting beliefs, but living, you know, it's, get the band back together. I love that one. I used to play in, I played in several rock bands, you know? If you're 40s, if you're in your 40s or older and you want to get the band back together, let's do it. I don't
Yeah.
care if you, it doesn't matter if you fail, but go ahead and give it a shot. It'll feel strange. You'll have some regret. Why didn't I stick with this when I was in my 20s? Well, you didn't. So you need to go from here. And um, and so get the band back together. Um, you're much more capable now than you were when you were 20.
Yeah.
Why do you think you're less capable now? Oh, when I was 20, I could. I was an idiot when I was 20, and I know I was pretty sharp, but I mean, compared to myself now, I mean, there's a lot more. There's still so much more. I'm not going to get to everything that I need as far as experience to provide
Yeah.
knowledge in this lifetime. I don't think there's enough time in this one. Maybe I'll get a second one if I'm lucky. I have no idea. But the point is, uh, the moment is now, and I don't know what your goals are going to be, but I don't think that it's different than what I'm doing. I think it's maybe you want to retire early. I don't think it's any different from what I'm doing because the process is going to require some faith. It's going to require some risk, and you're going to have to find some joy because the process with this is often very stressful. Like one thing that gets left out is a lot of times people, if they're attempting a long distance hike, they're so excited beforehand, they don't sleep for months leading up to. It's like by the time they get to the actual trail, they're like exhausted and they haven't even started yet. You know, you have to go through all of that and you have to go through the 10,000 100 times that your mind says, this is why you can't do this. This is why you cannot live this way. I look around, none of my neighbors live this way,
Yep.
you know? Um, oh, and start inside, you know? If you, like, the good thing for me with the process of being able to travel so much is that I do realize, like, no matter where I go, there I am. And I love that. It doesn't provide an escape for me because I don't buy into it. Like, I don't think it's better somewhere else, you know? I know no matter where I go, there I am. And with that being said, there are places that are more conducive to my lifestyle,
Yeah.
sure, right? Or maybe there's like a place that's better for you for your career or whatever. There are those things, but I've never been to a place that's like made everything perfect for me. Um, and I really think that in modern society, I don't think we're going to find that the 40s are the next 30s. Because I think I've heard that in some other ways, like, you know, the 60s are the new 50s or
Yeah.
something. Um, I don't think that's true. And I think you'd be selling yourself short to want to have a 30-year-old experience in your 40s. Why would you want to do that? You know, it's like, I mean, I, personally, like, you know, my friends that are men, when they want to date like 20-year-old girls, I'm like, why do you want to date 20-year-olds? Like, you already were a 20-year-old. Like, I didn't want to date 20-year-old girls when I was a 20-year-old, you know, like, and there's nothing wrong with that because tomorrow I might fall in love with a 20-year-old. But my point is, like, I don't want to have my 30s in my 40s. I think that's a misunderstanding. Like, why would it? I want to have my 30s in my 30s and my 40s in my 40s.
Yeah.
But my 40s may not be what someone else's 40s look like. And that's living my truth. What are my 40s? What are my 50s going to be? My 30s would have looked way different if I had all the skills and resources that I have now. I simply did not have them. The APT didn't happen when I first envisioned it. For what reason? I don't know, but I simply was not ready.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was. I was not ready.
Yeah.
And I
No,
and I am ready now. So uh, I don't want to be the 30-year-old, you know, and I don't want to be the 40-year-old having the 30-year-old experience. I want to be the 40-year-old that has not piled up so many beliefs that my 20-year-old self didn't have. That's what I want. I want to be a 40-year-old that has that is removing the accumulation of beliefs. Like, my spiritual path is not adding more beliefs and how the world works into my mind. I already have enough of crazy things going on in there that aren't true. You know, my process now as being a responsible person that's got to have some adult life behind me is the process of elimination. My spiritual path is by eliminating beliefs, not by putting more stuff in there.
Yep.
It's not true, and things about myself that aren't true, that maybe I was told at a time in my life and I held on to, that was maybe only coming from one person, and then I made it my reality. So, um, that's what I'm saying is, don't have your 30s and your 40s, have your 40s, but you can have the mind of the 20-year-old or the 15-year-old that doesn't have all the baggage,
Yeah.
the garbage, isn't carrying around all the garbage.
No.
And I think to people that feels like being younger. I think maybe that's what younger is. Yeah, there's the physical component, like my body feels good and loose, but there's that component of innocence, like returning to a time when you didn't know so much. It's relieving yourself of what you think to be true. It's relieving yourself of all this baggage. And in that way, you become younger. You become the more innocent. You become the more playful. You don't become the person, oh, I don't want to do that because I've done this before and it wasn't fun that time. And it becomes the person like, it wasn't fun that time before, but let's see how it is this time. We'll just let this be singular in its experience, not the accumulated beliefs that I've created here from the time coming out of the womb.
Yeah.
And maybe even generationally was created for me before I even came into the planet. That was just ways of being and culture that was passed down in families. So don't worry about your 30s and your 40s. Be your 40s in your 40s.
Yeah. Yeah, like, no, it's a good point. Like, I have a concept. It's called like limitless aging. So, like, basically, you don't create any limitations. You don't define yourself by an age. You kind of like just live life, whatever, however you feel. Like, you don't say I'm a number and I should be like this, because it isn't relevant. It's kind of like you do as much as you possibly can, and you don't allow yourself to be defined. Like, you just live your best life that you possibly can, whatever that definition is for you, and you don't worry about all these things society tells you or what other people tell you, and then that's the only way you can kind of live your life, because
think yeah, I mean, think how far you've come. In my experience, it's like I'm in my 20s, I'm trying to figure out who I am. That didn't work.
yeah,
I'm in my 30s, I spent like my whole 30s figuring out who I was not. That didn't really work. Here I am, 40, all this information, knowledge, wisdom, experience, and know-how. I'm capable now. Like, I had so many dreams in my 20s, but now like I can dream and I actually have like a way forward.
yeah,
I'm capable now. I know people. I know how to do things. And if I've loaded myself over the last 20 years of adulthood with all these ideas about, oh, I tried that, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. Well, then 40, you are going to feel older. You are going to feel slower, and the world is going to get more limited and smaller
yeah,
for you. Or you can look at it and be like, I'm so much more than I was then. And this is really the time where I have the resources, I have the know-how, and I can do it. I don't have to like dabble anymore,
yeah.
So, and it's not all positive. I mean, my beard turned white. I'm not real happy about it. I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
I was on a backpacking trip when that happened, and I hadn't seen myself in the mirror for several weeks, and saw myself in the mirror for the first time and went, what the heck is this? I didn't know it was white under there.
Yeah, we all have those surprises. Nothing we can
Yeah.
do about that. Well, Rue, this has been wonderful. I really enjoyed the conversation. So I'm sure a lot of people will find it interesting and get a lot of value out of it. So how do people find you online?
Great. I mean, as far as finding us, we have a website that will be soon will be replaced. But for right now, that's www.americanperimetertrailproject, because we were the project before we became the conference,
Yeah.
um, at weebly.com. And then also Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. If you put in Rue McKenrick or you put in American Perimeter Trail, you'll find us. We have community pages on there where you can post. And then we also have an information page, which is just like giving all the announcements. Like for instance, tonight I do a trail stories where we have an event online where I tell stories for a while, and then we have a Q&A, and I go tell them stories of the American Perimeter Trail.
Yeah.
So we always have things like that going on, and you can find us. You can find us online. Uh, I have 3,000 more miles this summer, and we are fully supported through contributions. So all of that money comes through. At this point in time, like we have outstanding grants, but believe it or not, a lot of this process has happened through the contribution of individual donors. So it hasn't been like big checks written out by corporations. It's been people just like you and I that believe in the process, the project, and ultimately want to see this thing get done and are rooting for me at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you can do that on the website. And if not, I mean, we're accessible. You can reach the board through American Perimeter Trail Project at Gmail. And then me personally is Rue McKenrick at Gmail. And we'll direct you, however we need to. When I'm out, I'll be leaving here in a couple weeks, and I'll be out on trail. And during that time, business still goes on as usual, because our board will be handling all front country matters during that time. So you'll still be able to get hold of someone if you need to. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Mm. I wanted to say also, like this summer we are there's possible documentary in the works, and also we are going to be sharing, like not in real time, but close to real time, the actual journey. So you're going to be able to see footage as if you were actually out there hiking with me. And we're happy to be able to bring that to you this spring and summer. It wasn't the same experience we had for the rest of the trip. So, and me opening up my heart to the greater experience, I've decided to share all of this, and I'm really looking forward to it, even though I'm super nervous about it as well.
Okay. So, so everyone keep posted. You'll see a lot more of Rue in the
That's
future.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Well, Rue, thanks again. And well, good luck in a couple of weeks.
Great. Take care, everyone out there.